Hey everyone, and welcome to Coffin Talk, interviews with the living. This is everyone's favorite weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, our guest is Tim McCoy. And Tim and I are long old best friends. We met on Tuesday, and we had a kick conversation. And I immediately was like, "The rivers run very deep with you. I want to have you on Coffin Talk." So he did send me a bio, and I do know more information about him. But I'm just going to actually read a few facts about him because I want to peel back the layers after that. But he's a combat veteran, a former law enforcement officer, a business owner in tech and physical security, and he advocates for healing PTSD through alternative medicine. What I liked the most about his show is, as he says, he brings a raw authenticity and relentless curiosity to every episode. And while that may just sound like a really cool phrase, like I really felt that from him. He really does have a raw, natural approach to inquisitive questions, and he just like wants to learn. And so I felt like a kinship immediately with you, Tim, because that's how I feel about life. And then we found out, and this is the last time I'm gonna just talk, that we grew up like very near each other. So that's always comforting and weird too. Like when you're at the end of an interview and you're like, oh wow. So that kind of segues into the first question we always ask on the show, which is, how old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Oh man. So I'm 44 years old, almost 45. I grew up all over the place. My parents are from the Bay Area, Half Moon Bay Area. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, it's the San Francisco area. And but we moved all over the place. I lived in LA. I lived up by, Northern California in the middle of nowhere called Greenville, California. And then spent kind of the majority of my life in Oregon. Back in 2001, I moved back down to the Bay Area for about 4.5 years. During that time, I was in the National Guard, and 9/11 happened, and so I got activated and spent some time on the Golden Gate Bridge doing physical security. We were supposed to be protecting it from terrorism, which little secret, there's no way we would have been able to stop anybody from doing anything. A couple dudes with some M16, and yeah, man. But I mean, you're on Coffin Talk, you talk death. That was kind of my first experience with seeing death, man. So the Golden Gate Bridge is like the number one place in the world for people to jump off, and I watch people do that. It was horrific, saw that happen. But I mean, that's just a little fragment of my life.
Okay, you didn't say what generation you're from, but I don't even care. I want to ask about this. So I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm very familiar with actually the Bay Bridge more than the Golden Gate, just because I was on the East Bay side in Berkeley. But the point being, yes, they're both actually famous. And I know there's that famous documentary, which I actually haven't watched, because as much as I like to talk about death, I don't like to watch and see death. But I am curious, because people always ask me this. Did people like pull up cars, park, and then get out and jump? Or was it like people like standing? Like, can you kind of go through like how you would even know that someone's doing it?
Yeah. So most of the time, there's a thing called Bridge Patrol. There's so many law enforcement agencies on that bridge that it's crazy. You wouldn't even believe it, but it's Highway Patrol, state park police, because it's, they have the Presidio right there. And, so their federal police are there. The National Guard was there. San Francisco PD, San Francisco County. I mean, just agency after agency. But they watch it all the time. But I would say the majority of people, you could kind of tell. We would always get kind of a heads up, like they would call it a 1031, and we're like, oh, possible 1031. Being, this morbid or not morbid, we were kind of down below the bridge, and so we'd run out there and look and see if we could see, who's up. And, I would say 50% of the time, you see somebody hop over the rail, and it's devastating. It's terrible. But there's been a couple times when it was like somebody stopped. I mean, there was this one time when I was working in the middle of the night, and, all the power goes out on the bridge, all the lights, everything, boom, just goes out, and lights come on. There's a car sitting there, and the person had gotten out and jumped off, and I'm like, dude, I wonder if they like were like, God, give me a sign if this is it, because it was the wild. I've ever, not ever experienced, but it was pretty freaking wild. Like, because that was shocking, Um, but man, yeah, it's that the bridge can go on and on and on. Yeah, I got pulled off of that to go spend some time in Iraq, which that kind of sucked because I went from working on the Golden Gate Bridge, and if you're not familiar how the military works, we were living in a four-star Marriott hotel downtown San Francisco. All our food was paid for. It was like the bougiest setup you've ever experienced. And in the military, they pay you a thing called BAH, so they pay you based on where you live. And they were saying we lived in
Wow.
San Francisco, so not only did we get a free hotel, they also paid us a housing allowance. So I was making the most money I'd ever made in my life, and so I got yanked off of that and sent to Iraq, live in a tent for a year, and I made about half the money over there. I'm like, this is not equating. So yeah, that's from there. I mean, my story goes on and on and on, and I'm happy to pick my brain. I think I'm Generation X, 19.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I'm like, yeah,
I'm actually much more interested in there's a trend like there's more and more people like you in our age bracket. Tulsi Gabbard comes to mind.
yep,
Just people who served and therefore deserve all the credibility and respect in the world, who don't agree with the mainstream like talking points that all military personnel used to
yeah,
kind of walk with. And it's
yeah,
not a disrespectful tone, and it's not a like I have regret or I'm judging this or that. It's more of like a tone of compassion,
hmm,
with specifically response to PTSD. So um, I never ask former soldiers or law enforcement like specific questions that are like
sure,
triggering and or like inappropriate, but I
uh,
do open the door for you to kind of explain the best way for inquisitive people to talk to people about it, because I feel like there was and is still an unfair double standard of like support all troops was the message when we were young, where I'm the same
yeah,
age.
yeah,
So like
yep,
every sticker on every car said support our troops. I'm like, okay, but like aren't I allowed to have an opinion about Iraq? Like can't I
for
still have an
sure.
opinion? And so that was kind of like the beginning of like a new era of like how do you civilly respect the people in the military and law enforcement. Again, I'm putting both together because especially with
Yeah,
Black Lives Matters and yeah, so you,
totally.
you know where
Like
I'm going.
for me, like so I was working on the Golden Gate Bridge, but we knew for months and months and months that we were getting ready, like we're gonna attack Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction. So in San Francisco, the protests started happening and people were, angry and angry about this war. And me, I took it personally, like, well, screw you. I'm a soldier. I'm here to defend you and this and that. Fast forward, 10 years later, reflecting back on that war and all the lies that were told, and it was just horrible. There was no weapons of mass destruction. We went in there for no fucking reason, and so many people lost their lives, and we spent all this money, and just ruined everything. That country is not any better off than when we went there, and so I respect the troops, and but I think it's hard when you're in the military. You're supposed to say, yeah, I'm going to do what you tell me to, and you can't have an opinion. But, come looking back on it, a totally wrong decision. Afghanistan, I never served in Afghanistan, but same thing. It's like we were over there for 20 years to find a dude in a cave. And then we left, and we left all this money, we left all this equipment. And what did we accomplish? Nothing. So I get fired up about that. Don't, you
No,
know?
no, and that's why
Yeah.
like I have not tons, but I have enough friends in law enforcement and former slash current. I have one friend who's a U.S. Marshal, and I respect the hell out of these guys. And every one of you has a different opinion. Like none of
Yep.
you share a mind, and that's what's frustrating too to me is this idea that like just because you're trained like any group is trained, where like the weakest link is the link, like you're all
Yep.
a group. That doesn't mean you still think the same. It just means in
Yeah.
combat you're gonna like protect each other, which is great.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Totally.
does PTSD hit people when they're still serving? Because the word post is always like interesting to me.
Yeah. Yes, because I was still in. So I did 13 years in the National Guard. I got out as a staff sergeant E6. And so I went to Iraq in 2003, 2004, and did my time there. came back and almost immediately was suffering from pretty bad PTSD. I mean, it really, the first time I noticed it was, well, there's a couple things. So I went into law enforcement eventually, but when I came back, my whole goal was like, I want to be a cop. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a cop.
That's cool.
So it's very hard. It used to be very hard to get into law enforcement. And I had applied for, before that for many agencies and stuff, and it was very hard to get hired. And so I was not very good at speaking. You may notice that now, but during interviews and stuff like that, um, so I never got hired. And when I came back from Iraq, I did a thing called self-sponsoring myself through the academy. And so in Contra Costa County, the sheriff's department has an academy, and I signed up for that. So I was probably 5, 6 months back from, not even 5 months back from the academy or from Iraq when that started. And so a couple weeks in, I mean, all of a sudden I'm just like having all these issues, this anxiety, and I'm smoking like a chimney. I broke my ankle training to take the test right, but I still went through and signed up. And I can remember like 2 weeks, into the academy, one of the drill instructors, their drill instructors was yelling at me. I didn't tell anybody where I was or where I'd come from, and this young kid gets in my face, this officer, and gets in my face like I would never, I would never want to be in a combat or a firefight with you or a shootout with you, like telling me this, and I'm like, you piece of, you have no fucking idea where I just came from. I was heated, and it was like, so the next day it was like, okay, I'm either gonna kill this dude or I'm gonna just leave, and I thought, um, I should probably leave. And at the same time, I started having all these kind of medical issues, unexplained medical issues. Like, it's a weird story, but like my left nipple started leaking fluid, and like I was like, it's just all this weird endocrine issues with my endocrine system. And so I went in and had all these tests done, and it was all unexplained. They have all these unexplained illnesses in the military. But we when I was over there, we slept in a freaking bombed out hangar. Literally, they sent a missile through this aircraft hangar, blew out the inside of it, and our command thought it would be a good idea if we went and lived in there. And there's depleted uranium and all this that just all these. Yeah, so it just goes on and on. But so I yanked myself out of the academy. And at that point, I was dealing with PTSD during this time, and kind of trying to occupy my mind with anything but focusing on my issues, But I really missed my family. And so my family lived up in the Oregon area. And so I was like, man, I'm going to go back to Oregon. I started this business within a week. I'm making a ton of money. If I can do it here in the Bay Area, I can do it anywhere. So I moved up to Southern Oregon and started up my business and made $65 in the first 6 months, and like almost like went bankrupt. It was hell. Yeah.
I did not. I was like expecting that story to go so the opposite direction.
Yeah, horrible. So stressful. And yeah, luckily my ex-wife, it was girlfriend or fiance at the time, she had a job, and but we didn't share finances. I didn't want to share, like, so she worried about my money, but there was no worry about her money. I didn't know anything about it, and so to kind of keep my, I'm doing okay, I would just start taking out credit card after credit card after loans and doing this, just trying to stay afloat to look like I'm doing okay, And in the meantime, I'm just getting in more debt, and I'm trying to, cover my ass by paying one card with the other and loans. Horrible, bad decision, but my relationship was trash. I hated it, but my dad was a pastor, and so he lived in the Bay Area, or I'm sorry, he was running a church up here in Southern Oregon, and they had had a great little church, and I wanted to be part of it. And so I came back after Iraq, and was happy to be home around all my family. My sisters, my brother lived here. And my mom said, why did you move back to this area, living with your girlfriend? All the people in the church know about it. Basically, you're an embarrassment. And, you know, they were pissed about it. And I was brokenhearted. Yeah, it was awful. And so, man, I was spiraling. There was a lot of darkness in my life at that time, but I ended up getting married to that girl because of the pressure from my family trying to make it right, like, okay, I'm sorry, So I get married, cry at the altar, literally on my wedding day, not tears of joy,
Oh
tears of
man, Tim, this is like
yeah,
really heartbreaking.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
and so that's so I go from there, and I'm miserable for years, and my PTSD is out of control. I'm not making any money, and
and you're not doing anything to like help your PTSD. You're just kind of like smoking
no,
cigarettes and
no,
just like yeah, like
smoking a ton of cigarettes.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a yeah. I so that is kind of a funny thing. Like I smoked for a lot of cigarettes, and I got on Wellbutrin to help me get off of it, and it actually worked. It
Oh,
got me
cool.
off of it. I started taking some medications, and I was starting to do a little bit better. And then, yeah, I decided like this relationship, I do not want to be married to this girl. Like this was a bad choice. I talked to my dad, and this is in probably August, the end of August of 2007. I'm talking to my dad. I say, man, I made a bad mistake. I don't want to be married to this girl. And my dad's advice was, well, go to counseling and try to work it out.
Uh,
So I didn't do that. Instead, I started kind of working out and was like getting to the point where it's like I'm fucking leaving. I'm done with this. I'm on the right track. I talked to my brother. He was my business was starting to pick up a little bit, and yeah, I talking to my brother, and we're kind of making a plan to maybe get a place together. And yeah, on I guess it was September the last day of September 31st. My brother called me, and he's like, "Hey man, I want to come over, hang out." And I asked my ex-wife at the time, like, "Hey, is it cool if my brother comes over? We're gonna just hang out and do whatever, And she's like, "I don't want anybody over here." She was nasty at that time to me, and I whatever. She was dealing with
we're
her own stuff.
we're both divorced, so I get it. Like
Yeah,
I
and
know how like in real time you just like can't stand the other person, but
it,
many years have passed, so I just want to give
sure.
you credit. Like I understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing is, she was dealing with a lot, and I didn't mention this, but I can mention it now. While I was in Iraq, her sister at 14 years old was killed in a car accident.
Oof, yeah.
Terrible. And she had a trash ass, upbringing, like in her mind, whether
Yeah.
it was, whether it wasn't, she was dealing with her own issues. And so fast forward, she didn't want my brother there, and then go to sleep about 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning. My phone starts buzzing next to me. I look over, dad and mom, and I pick up the phone and answer it, and it's my dad. And he starts asking me these random questions like, where's your brother live? What, blah, 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 asking about my brother. And I'm confused. And all I can think of, I hear people in the background talking, and he says, I say, what is the repo man there? Because my brother was behind on everything, had a kind of a rough upbringing. And he says, yeah. And so I kind of was like, oh, good. And then no, he then says, no, your brother was killed in a car accident last night. And it was kind of a weird situation. So literally that night, I woke up probably about 1 o'clock in the morning and had this overwhelming panic that my brother was dead. And yeah, he was. And I don't know what that is, but I got my first spiritual poking that it wasn't a good one, but it was definitely somehow I knew that, and so that stopped everything. I wasn't about to move. I wasn't about to move out of my house and divorce my ex-wife. It changed my life went from downhill to just completely smashed. And so for the next 3 years, I stayed in that relationship until I turned 30 years old, which was the age my brother died. And you know, I've been slowly pulling my out of this for the last, fuck, 15 years now. I mean, it's been a long time, but however long it's been, geez. So anyway, that's kind of where the beginning of my life started, and
Mhm.
you can
No,
cut me off
that's
anytime.
I mean, it's not about cutting you off. I mean, first of all, just it's important to actually say it. It's not I'm saying it just to say it, but like my heart
Yeah,
really does go out to you. I like have had severe issues in my life and they're different, but I understand the some people like in AA. I don't go to AA. I'm not a recovering alcoholic, but I know
yeah,
that like there's this thing called rock bottom, but it's not just
hmm
for alcoholics. I think it's for
yeah,
non-spiritual people and it's also for spiritual people. Like it doesn't matter, but like I feel like for most of us life slaps you really hard. And I feel like some people it's really early in childhood. It's just like a horrible childhood. And then
yep,
for others, like I don't feel like there's any one time, but it is unique when it happens to you. You know what yours is. And if anyone's listening and you haven't had it yet, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not saying like it has to, but I remember thinking that in my 30s, like, oh, my best friend died of cancer. This other friend got divorced. This other person had like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I guess I'm just really lucky. I won the lottery. I've never gotten my dreams, but I also like don't, Then I was like hit
yeah.
by a car and I was like, well, that has to be it. No, that wasn't it. I was in a wheelchair for a while. That wasn't like,
Oh
but my
shit.
point is, you do speak with this like earnestness and rawness, but also, you don't sound pessimistic, you don't sound beaten, and you don't sound like you're ever going to go back. Was
No.
it how quick after 30 was it where you knew you'd never go back? Like when was the actual point do you think in your life? Because you're 44 now, so hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, like tragedies and anxiety and PTSD didn't necessarily get better. My life got better because, I met my wife and my wife is amazing. She's the rock behind me.
Your wife now, like you're saying,
Yeah,
yeah,
yep,
okay,
yep.
just making sure. Okay,
Yeah, nah,
sorry.
nah,
No,
nah.
no, because it gets confusing for me too.
Yeah,
I'm
for
like, I have
sure.
an
Yeah.
accident. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, so I got married again pretty quickly thereafter. And after my divorce, relatively didn't seem like it because I was dating in
yeah,
between that. I
yeah.
was like,
We're
oh, this
we
is
have such
fun.
a similar life. That's crazy.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we got married and but while I was single, I dated my friend's sister. Yeah, that's what friends do. He dated my sisters. I dated his, and
it's
she
also the
was
divorced man. You just kind of like throw
oh
out like
yeah, I
cards.
gotta talk to
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
And so I dated this girl for a while. I lived in Oregon still, but she was a cop down in the Bay Area. And I don't know. It's a long story, but we kind of started dating for a little while, and I did some ride-alongs with her, and I was like, oh man, you know what? I still have that like I want to be a cop thing, And by that time, not as many people are wanting to sign up for law enforcement and stuff like
especially in
that.
the Bay Area. Oh
Yeah,
my
so
gosh.
I was like thinking about going back into it, and almost moved down to the Bay Area with her, but she beautiful girl, much love to her. She's a great person, but I started seeing those same tendencies as my ex-wife, where I was like,
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
just jump into this same thing again. I just left that. And so on this, my wife at the time, we were just friends, but we hung out all the time, and so I just was like, you know what, dude, I love this chick. Like, I love this chick. I've
Yeah.
loved her since the moment I've seen her. I just didn't think I had a chance because my wife, is a smoke show, and then there's me, and I didn't think I could pull her in. Somehow I did, and so so we dated, and we had a great time. And one of the first conversations she ever had with me was that I don't want kids, and I was like, cool, I don't want kids either. And about and so we just partied, and a lot of the partying that I did was to mask my anxiety and depression and all this stuff because that was still raging inside of me. But I was just really, I never consider myself an alcoholic, but if I'm going to be around people, that's my jam. I'm not going to be
Yeah,
there
yeah.
sober. No way. And then, when I get home from that party, it's just full of anxiety and ruminating thinking and all these, problems that on the outside you look fine, on the inside you're just a mess, and so eventually we kind of were like, hey, we decided, you know what, maybe we shouldn't party so much and we want to have kids. And so we started that process. And long story short, we ended up having 4 different pregnancies that turned into miscarriages and lost those pregnancies. And it's like, fuck, dude, and heartbreaking, destroyed. Some of those were far enough along where we thought we had named these people, or
I
one
understand. Yeah.
one our daughter, and this is a long story, and it's a rose, and that's a wild ass story how I got that tattoo, and it was recent. But yeah, I mean, we made it through that, and we ended up having 2 kids, beautiful kids. They're healthy and well, and 5 and 3, and they're the best things I've ever experienced.
I just want to let you know how much we have in common. Like, so we're both divorced and we both remarried someone and we both feel like we outkicked our coverage, as the saying goes, and all that. But in addition to that, my wife has been pregnant 5 times with me and we have 2 kids. So we've had
Yep.
3. I won't
Yeah.
get into the stories, but I understand what you mean about that. Like,
It,
and then yeah, and then the Bay Area connection and everything. But I just think it's very the miscarriage thing is something that I actually went out of my way to speak about a lot to people, and I'm glad that you're doing it too. Which is like
yeah.
the numbers are way higher than people think because there's not a lot
Totally.
of reporting. And so, just
Yeah.
if you're young and you're out there, like, don't give up, keep trying. I would
Totally.
assume you
Yeah,
would
and
agree.
it's devastating
Yeah,
for a woman,
yeah,
especially,
yeah. That's oh my god. Yeah,
we
thank you.
go into the OBGYN, and it's like, oh, we're gonna have an ultrasound today. We're far along, no heartbeat, and you're like, and just what do you do with that? Like, my wife's just devastated, and I mean, what did we do? We went and got a bottle of wine and walked through the woods and just drank our, sorrows away. Not getting drunk, but just like at that point, it's like you don't know what to do. You're
No,
just
for
at a
sure.
loss, and you
Um,
try and try.
so we've talked about a lot of death on the show, which is actually
Yeah,
appropriate. We talked about people
totally.
jumping off the bridge. We've talked about again your brother, which
Yep.
really does break my heart. I have a brother; he's my best friend. Like the one thought I can't think is that thought. It's like the
Yeah.
yeah, and so and then we've talked about the children and the miscarriage and like naming them and all that because I think that does count.
Yeah.
So my question to you would be what I ask every guest, excuse me, is what do you think happens when you die? But I would like to know, like, has that changed and will that change, or has it always
So
been consistent? Especially since your dad was a pastor
no,
and all
yeah,
that.
yeah, it hasn't always been consistent. My original thought was like, well, I was raised on, you believe in Jesus and you go to heaven. You don't believe in Jesus, you burn in hell for all time and eternity. That was
Wow.
kind of my upbringing,
Yeah.
and kind of a scary one because it's like, well, I guess grandma went to hell. I guess all these, like,
Yeah.
wow, she seems so nice, but guess she's burning, and crazy, and but eventually I started realizing, and this is my opinion, this isn't religious advice, but I just thought, I don't think that's right. I don't think that God, in all his infinite wisdom and creating everything, would just send somebody, especially people who never even heard the story of Jesus, or they're going to burn in hell for all time and eternity. It just wasn't adding up, and there we could talk about that, and you know, people have philosophies on, well, if they've never heard the story, then they're still going, and if they believe in something, and so yeah, but really where my experience changed was in the last probably year and a half now. I went and did ayahuasca for the first time, and I had the most life changing, profound experience.
Bring it on.
Like,
Let's hear it.
yeah,
Go
it
ahead.
it changed my life, and so I went into it. my life sounds good, and on the outside it was, but there were some other things that happened between marriage and ayahuasca, tragedies and law enforcement and dealing with death, and I had a kid, little kid die on me, and that's kind of a weird story, and it ties into my ayahuasca experience. So I was doing better, and then yeah, I'll tell you real quick. Like
Yeah,
I was
please.
doing better, and then on December 12th, 2022, I think it was, I was called out to a child not breathing. And
As a police officer?
As a police
Okay.
officer,
Okay.
yep. And so I was working the night shift, got a call. I was the closest one there, me and my partner. Um, Go to this call. We were about two 2 minutes away from the location. So I pull up, run in. I'm the first one in. My partner's driving, so I jump out of the car, just haul ass, jump up on the porch, through the door, run in, see this mom laying there with her son, little boy, laying on the ground there, and she's freaking out. There's a baby in a swing, right there. And I don't know anything, but this kid isn't breathing. And all I can do is just run in there and start CPR on him. And immediately while I'm doing it, all I can think of is my son. And my son was born on June 6th of 2019. So um, this was 21, this happened. And so my son is, you know, this exact same, the same age as this little boy inside doing, chest compressions on this guy, and trying with all my heart to save this guy. And yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't save him, and he died. And but when we're going to take down all the information about him, my birthday is on June 6th. My son's birthday is on, or I'm sorry, my birthday is on June 7th. My son's birthday is on June 6th. And this little boy's birthday was on June 7th, my birthday. We share, he was the exact same age as my son, except for my birthday one day later. And that really struck a chord with me, man. Like, what the you know? Why me? Why this kid? Why this age? Why my birthday? You know? And so that really set me in a tailspin. I got back on medication for anxiety, depression, PTSD again for the umpteenth time in my 20-year PTSD career. And um, yeah, so fast forward to arrhythmia, I go there and I don't realize it until I'm in the Uber on the way to the airport that, it's December 12th. And that's the day this little boy died on me. And I was like, what the?
Wow.
And so that was like, kind of shook me, and then I fly down to Costa Rica. I do this experience. I check in to the hotel or to the room, and my room number is 6-7. This kid's
Yeah,
birthday, my
I'm
birthday.
tracking.
What? Yeah,
Yeah.
what? Now I'm just like, what, dude? Like, this is just weird, synchronicities. And so, um, during, so get into ayahuasca, and I mean, it was literally the most incredible healing experience of my life, but also the scariest I've ever done in my life, all wrapped into one. And there's 4 different nights that you do, and every night was different. My first night, I went there because I wanted to heal my anxiety or heal my loss of my brother, and then kind of deal with my PTSD, deal with all these other tragedies, because there are many. I'm just touching on a couple. And so it started off, and I haven't done any psychedelics in my past, but I've smoked weed and done some other stuff, and so yeah, I'm laying there, and I'm just getting angrier and angrier, because I'm like, man, I came all this way. I want some healing, and nothing's happening. I'm just getting sick to my stomach, you know, and
That's so accurate.
yeah, I'm just getting sick, and so I keep going up, asking for more, and eventually they kind of cut me off, and they're like, dude, you know, uh, and so finally, I mean, it's been hours, and I'm just sick to my stomach. I'm not throwing up, you know, which is purging, and so eventually I say it, and I just close my eyes, and I'm like, I'm just gonna try to go to sleep, you know. And the music, they're playing music, and there's all this smoke everywhere, you know, and there's people crying and purging, and it's just this chaos that you're in, you know, and I'm just mad. And you know, eventually all of a sudden, you know, I start to see like this purple moving, you know, and I'm like, huh, that's weird. You know, I see something. Yeah. And, you know, really it just, I'm so upset and so sad and just angry. I'm like, what the did I do? I'm away from my children, you know, like I've taken all this time. And, you know, eventually this flute starts playing, you know, and all I want to do is see my brother and talk to my brother, you know. And I hear this flute and this purple is going everywhere, you know. And all of a sudden I see this figurine moving in kind of herky jerky way, you know. And man, it like it's hard to explain, but it was my brother. And I couldn't see him very well, but I knew, you know, he always had this weird dance. You know, he was quirky, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. No, this
and
is cool.
yeah, and I knew it was him, and it just brought such like peace. And I just
Love it.
started sobbing and crying, and he didn't say anything to me, and I couldn't really see him, but I knew it was him, and he was there with me, and yeah, you know, so that kind of got me through my first part of the ceremony, and I had drank so much, you know, and it was profound, and there was a bunch of other stuff that went down. I wrote out every night in detail. When I went back from the room or from the ceremony to the room, I started just ferociously writing down everything I possibly could to remember. And you know, my poor nephew, my brother had a son, Garrett, and he didn't know where I was going, but like I had this amazing experience. And at this time, he's like 20, 19 years old, 20. I fuck 4 in the morning
Oh,
and
wow.
ferociously send him a message. I saw your dad. Like,
Oh, God.
I'm down here
Oh,
doing
no.
this ayahuasca. Don't text people when you're under
Oh,
ayahuasca.
God.
Um,
Yeah.
and so he's a good, you know, he's good. And
He
he's
took
like,
it in
yeah,
stride.
that's great, man. You know, but so I wrote down and I just wanted to write all these things I was seeing. And eventually, you know, this thought came in my mind and it was my dad. And he's like, you know, that's enough for tonight, my son. And he always calls me my son. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, I go from there to like, I close my eyes and I'm in my room now, but I've taken 5 shots of ayahuasca. I think I'm okay. I close my eyes and all of a sudden I realized like, oh, I'm still big time under the medicine. And all of a sudden I go and I'm like in this operating room. And I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but they call it sacred surgery. And these entities can show up and perform surgery on you to heal you. And all of a sudden, I'm in this operating room, and I kind of realized because I had heard about this before, and I feel I'm laying there, but I feel like I'm sitting up in this operating room, and I don't really see the entities, but they are like, "Do you want this? Do you want the surgery?" And I didn't physically say anything, but I transmitted like yes to them. And on the back of my head right here, I just felt like this. It was just this, bzzz, you know, like this crazy, like they were working on me. And it sounds totally schizophrenic. And I mean, I get it, but when you try to explain
Yeah.
you shouldn't really try to explain your ayahuasca experience, but sometimes I like to talk about it. But anyway, I mean, I really felt like they fixed my PTSD and my anxiety that night. And from there, like, I mean, the next night was horrific for me. I started, dealing with all my demons. And when I say demons, you could say, you've had different experiences. Sometimes you're awake, you're looking around, and you can go to the bathroom and you're in the medicine. For me, it was that experience, but at the same time, it was like a veil had been dropped and there was demons and angels and Jesus showed up, and all while I'm in awake in the medicine. I can look over and talk to, so and so, and I can look around and see all of the shit going on. And it was horrifying. It was absolute hell. I was scared, and all I could do was just pray and pray and pray to God, like, to please take this from me. Looking back on it, it's been over a year, and I've done other experiences since then. I think maybe those were real. Maybe I was seeing into other dimensions, or the veil had been dropped, or maybe those were just the demons that were inside of me and they needed to come out. And I purged and I purged and I purged. And that, for people who don't know what that term is, it's vomiting and getting your brains out. And that was a lot. And, at one point, during that night, I screamed, in part of my language, but I just was puking so hard, and I just screamed, "Get the out of me," as loud as I could. And I wasn't talking about the puke. I was talking about all of this anxiety and depression and anger and sadness that I'd been carrying around with me for so long. And in that night, I feel like I released all of those demons in me. And my life has been incredible ever since. I mean, that night changed my life. The Thursday after that really changed my life, and we could go down that road. I could talk about this stuff for
Well,
forever, but
I would love to have you back on to talk about that. I do try
yeah,
to keep the shows to like a certain time
yeah,
length, and
for sure.
I still want to hear your tie-in to like what do you think happens when you die with all this. And again, you didn't
Yeah,
not answer the question. I know it's
yeah,
diving
yeah,
to that, but you
yeah.
saw your
So
brother
yeah,
in like a different form. So I'm curious, like, is your brother still around? Like, what do you think
yeah,
happens?
100%. So I think when you die, you basically, it sounds weird, but this is almost the death. We're almost living in our death. And then when you
I love that answer.
and then when you die, you're like, "Oh man, that was fucking weird," like everybody gets around, and I feel like we are spiritual beings and we are living in a spiritual realm most of the time. And I think Earth is we're here because on my last night of ayahuasca, Jesus showed up and I screamed at him, "What's the point of all of this?" And he was just always there around me. And eventually he looked at me and said, "It's the human experience." And I believe that. I'm like, out of everything you could say to me, it's the human experience. And that pretty much sums it up. Like, it is the human experience. And we are living in, if you're a spiritual being, and I don't know everything by any means about what the afterlife is like, but I got a real good taste of it. And, we're alive and well. And I think that we come back to Earth to, have these human experiences and learn. And it's like Earth is like school, and you go back and you're like, that was cool. I was Joe Rogan or the president, or man, I was a homeless crackhead living under a bridge. How the hell did I mess that up? Like, and then you get to do it over again. And I believe in karma. I don't know exactly how that works out, but if you didn't learn from this life, you get to go do it all over again. And so death is not the end. Death is just, you're not even dying. I think you're just going, okay, now you're back in this reality, and you're like, okay, you know, why all of this is happening, I don't know. I think God has a grand plan for everybody's life. And, you know, if you didn't do a great job on this life, I promise you, you'll have another opportunity. And I know that I, I, I ran into that little boy on my ayahuasca trip, and he told me, you know, I wanted to stay, I wanted to live, but it wasn't my time. And he gave me that peace and that, you know, comfort of knowing that, like, he's all right, you know, and he'll do it again when he needs to. And you know, for whatever reason, that was just his life experience here, his human experience, you know. And so yeah, I want to keep your show tidy.
No, Tim, I have to tell you, you're like, I don't know, this is my first time in on a podcast. What do I do? You're not only are you like completely compelling and interesting, but you're like one of the most fair people I've ever met. You're fair about yourself. I wish I had told you that I have to bleep every time you swear because I had to keep a
I'm
list.
so sorry.
No, it's
Oh,
my
no,
fault.
no.
And you're the third time in the last like 3 months where I just like forgot to mention that. But the thing
Oh
is,
no.
I swear a ton, and I know that
Yeah.
like if I tell you not to swear, you might not tell the story the same way. So once you
Yeah.
got the ball rolling, it was worth it. But I'm just trying to point out how like
Yeah.
natural you are because you're so natural that you really are you. And you, this is the whole point of my show is I just want people to see that like you had so many good quotes, but one of my favorites was when you said like you go to the party and you're drinking and you just pretend that you're okay with everything, but then you get home and you just have like, what did I say? What did I do? How did they think of me? Like that.
Yeah.
So many people suffer from that, and all of us just lie, and we keep going out and like, especially in
Yeah.
America, like this charade. And when you're young, it's worse. It's not better. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're the guy not drinking, everyone's like, well, you can't handle this,
Yeah.
but really,
Yeah.
none of
What's
us
wrong
can
with you?
handle it. Yeah, like,
Everybody asks what's wrong with you, and you're like, wait, I'm the only one not taking poison. And
yeah,
don't get me wrong, I love a margarita. Like,
yeah,
dude, and now I drink for fun
yeah.
and not to cover up my, you know, my heartache and my anxiety. And I will say, ayahuasca maybe not be it may not be for everybody, but it changed my life. It healed that PTSD, that anxiety. So there is hope for you, because I tried all the different medications and it didn't work for me. Maybe it works for other people, but that's what worked for me. And it's not medical advice, and don't do illegal drugs or anything like that. I did it in a place that was a licensed medical facility, and so yeah. But I mean, if you're struggling, dude, there is hope for you out there. And that's why I started this podcast, and to share my stories and hear other people's stories. I don't get a chance to talk a lot on my end of the podcast, which is kind of funny, like, because I have a lot of stories. But
Yeah.
man, I appreciate you bringing me on and letting me share my story for the very first time. This is the first time I've ever been a guest on
Wow.
a podcast. I've never spoken public, like, except for, little business meetings in the military, stuff like that. But for the most part, yeah, I'm happy to share my story.
You're incredible. Your stories, plural, are incredible. It would be impossible to ever get to the bottom of Tim. It would be impossible to get to the bottom of anyone. And that's kind of like
Yeah.
when you're so quotable. I mean, seriously, like 5 million quotes in my head. But like the human experience, like, yeah, what else did you want Jesus to say? What would any of us like? What do
Yeah.
you want to hear? Like, why'd you go to the movie? For the movie experience. Like, of course you're here for this experience, and this experience is not like something you get to like. Oh no, I only want good things. I want like everything
Yeah.
I think Taylor Swift has, but none of the other stuff that I clearly see she has. Like, to idolize anyone, Joe Rogan, Taylor Swift, any of these famous people, Donald Trump, like it doesn't matter who you're looking at. All of these people internally suffer. They all have doubt and like what we're talking about. So
100%.
everyone at home, thank you again for listening to Coffin Talk and checking in. As always, the best way to support our show is just to head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up for the free once a week email, and you'll hear from me. My name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening or watching Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.